Today I wanted to share with you my running story. There have been some eventful reasons for why I run and why I have run, and there's been highs, there have been lows. There have been moments where I've made U-turns, literally and none, and I want to share them with you. There's some pretty interesting stories. There have been different reasons.
So let's get right into the story. So I made a few notes here just to keep me on track and keep me going, yeah? So my running story pretty much began when I was 15 years old. Now, obviously before that I'd been doing a lot of sports. I've always been a sports lover and done a lot of team sports, mainly rugby. Yeah, me, the tall, skinny guy, I didn't play rugby, football. But that's not about the running. When I really started running, for running, I was at the age of 15 at school in England. And the reason why I started to run quite a lot was because girls. There you go. Who would have thought that you would start running for girls? So, yeah, that was me. So I remember one evening I tried to impress some girls by doing a James Bond role. I thought I was a stunt double or James Bond or something, clearly. And I went to do like a James Bond stunt role, and I don't know, they loved it for some reason, and I got the attention. I don't know if that spurred me on, but then I was part of this trampolining club, and we would go trampolining with a friend, and there was this girl who was interested in me, and then I had this certain kick in me all of a sudden because I wanted to impress her, that I would go. I decided to go running around. I went to a boarding school when I was younger, and there was I think it must have been a 3-kilometer loop, but it was quite hilly. It was in Kent, and I thought it would be every night. Me and a friend, we would go running because we weren't. I'm just cooking some lentils. There's a lentil stuck in my throat. And yeah, I wanted to impress her, and so we would go running every evening, and not that she was there watching, but which for some reason thought they would be impressed. I want to get fitter, I want to get healthier, I want to be the best version of myself. So I think from that young age of 15, I've already kind of wanted to push myself and be a good role model to myself, and impress the girls then. So yeah, so if you want to know why I run now, then there's another video of that. I'll probably try and link it below. But yeah, so I think I impressed her, but then I think, to be honest, I probably scared her away with who I was. Probably a little bit too intense, I think, maybe, or maybe she didn't like my haircut, or I guess at that young age, if you wore like a certain brand of shoes, you weren't cool, or you didn't hang around with the right people. So who knows, it wasn't meant to be. So yeah, after that I started running a lot more, and I think at school I all of a sudden got a bit of a reputation for liking running, and there's this thing in England we do called the bleep test. So you run 20 meters from point to point, and every minute or something the beeps get quicker. So you have to make it, and people get eliminated. And I remember I was the person in the school, the top of the school, who got the best score, and I wasn't even, you know, part of a team sport, because it was very team sport orientated. And I remember like the PE teacher, the physical education teacher, being really kind of pissed off because, you know, somebody who didn't really apply themselves to the team sports like the school system wanted you to. I beat them, and one of my best friends as well, he also did the same, but I will remind you, he finished just behind me. But yeah, I can't remember what it was, but 14 or something. Back then it was quite a good score, and I was super happy, and everyone was like, wow, you're super cool. So then from there, I remember the next sort of thing was the cross-country season, and then obviously everyone had this expectation of me to be a great runner. So I had the expectation as well, and there's all this pressure, and I remember it, and I think I only finished 6th, and I didn't win it or something, and something like that. And there was like all this expectation of Mark to be the best, Mark to win, and yeah, it was hard to take, and I'm sure it's something like, you know, like that you have this expectation upon you, and you don't deliver. So who knows if that affected me later on in life or whatever, but there you go. So then after school goes to age of 18, I would say, in England. I guess it's college, but it's the same, it goes to 18. Then, sorry, I went to university. At university, I think I just treated that more as a social time, and I didn't really do much of sports. I did take up kickboxing, yes, rugby, kickboxing. What was going on, I don't know. And did kickboxing for the first year. Didn't really enjoy it, and didn't really do any endurance sports. It's really weird. Yeah, probably here and there the odd run or something, but nothing really that I can remember of. I think I did like a bit of cycling, road cycling, because I've always enjoyed that from a young age, because being half French, like the Tour de France and those sort of things are like huge, and I've always been a big fan and enjoyed supporting that, so I started to get into cycling a little bit. At this point as well, I also found a job through my dad, cheers dad, with a sports photography company, taking photos at running events, mainly marathons and half marathons across Europe. So we'd cover like big events like London, Berlin, Helsinki, Stockholm, Madrid, Lisbon, and I started to do that a lot. So I did that for 9 years, but I'm not going to shoot straight 9 years forwards. And that was like really, really fun, and to be part of that environment. That was my first time being at a race, but obviously not as a spectator, not as a runner, but as an employee in a way. You'd get such a kick when people were coming across the finish line, and it was really like, you get really emotional when people would cross the finish line, and especially the people who were finishing a marathon in 5 hours or half marathon in 4 hours or whatever. Those people who, you know, really pushing themselves and weren't naturally gifted, let's say. I mean, I think we're all naturally gifted, we just gone different ways in a way. And that really kind of maybe kick-started again a thought inside of me. Then I went traveling to Australia for a year, working over there, and I worked in Melbourne, and I had a New Zealand a guy from New Zealand as a flatmate, and all of a sudden I started running 5 kilometers along the Yarra River every evening, lunchtime, because I worked evening shifts most of the time. And that really, I got into that then. I was running along the river one day all of a sudden, and my knee just pinged. I was like, oh damn, I just, you know, stood awkwardly or something. So I carried on running, and I realized it was just not right. And I was like, what's going on here? Well, you know, why was it so sharp? It was like on tarmac, going downhill. It was super sort of normal. And yeah, it was just so weird. I mean, I remember getting home and like I started to walk home. Then that evening or the next day, it was like super inflated and inflamed, and I got really worried. And like, I saw a doctor, and yeah, they told me rest, ice, compression, elevate, don't do any running, blah, blah, blah. I was hobbling at work, I remember, because I couldn't stop working because I needed the money because I was traveling. So yeah, it was quite a kick in the teeth in a way, and I thought, okay, well, I've just got to stop running for now. And then time went by, and you know, I stopped running for a while, moved back to England, and then I'd start doing running. Then I started running again a year down the line or two, and I was living in Liverpool, and I started running in the evenings. And I remember getting home to my then stepmom, and I was like, okay, so now I've been doing 5K runs all the time and I really enjoyed it. And I remember one of them was the first time I ran with music. It was to Oasis, and I hated it just because it threw me off all tempo. Not that I don't like Oasis, I mean, they're not great, sorry, but yeah, it just threw me off tempo. So that's when I learned I didn't like running with music or listening to something. Yeah, and then I remember coming home and saying, right, look, I can run 5K easy, 10K easy, you know, this is so, you know, good, and I could run a half marathon. I always remember them saying to me, oh, no, you could, and I was like, oh, I could run a half marathon easy, and like, no, you couldn't do it. And I you know, like, I think I was a little bit impressionable then. I was like, okay, probably not, yeah, you probably have to do a lot more training. Then I remember I didn't have a job, and yeah, I was living in Knutsford in Cheshire, and I was running 8 or 10 kilometers every day. Just randomly, I decided to do it, and obviously I didn't have a job, and I loved being in the national park around there in Tatton Park, which was so beautiful, and I just run up and down it 8 kilometers. And I remember, like, there was a few people in the shops I'd always have to run past, and I would go in them sometimes, and I remember some of them would actually call me Mr. Spandex or Mr. Runner, because they knew me as that or saw me like then. Then I think around that point, you know, I just thought, hey, I'm going to run randomly 21, a half marathon by myself. And just one day, randomly, I just ran up and down the park twice and did one loop at the end. And I was so pumped, so happy, so like elated. I ran a half marathon. I didn't care about the time. I think back then it was like 1 hour 58 or something like just under 2 hours. And I was just so happy the fact that I actually did a half marathon. It felt like the biggest achievement ever for some reason. So yeah, that was quite not monumental, but a sort of enlightening moment. And then I remember I was running again, and then the knee injury came back again. It kept coming off and coming on, and I was just like, okay, well, I went to a different doctor in the UK, because I'd already been to one probably like a year or so before, and they, you know, what did they tell me? RICE, rest, ice, compression, and elevate. I was like, what? You know, like, come on, it must be doing something. I think at that time I wanted someone to go in with like a needle and shave off a bit of a tendon or something. I thought there'd be like a miracle thing that someone would be able to press a button or give me a magic pill, and then I could go and run and do whatever I wanted without any risk. And I just thought, right, I'm not a runner, you know, I'm not, maybe my body's just not designed to run. And so I continued with my road cycling, doing that. And then I met the love of my life, and Emma, and no, not running. And we moved to Paris, and Emma got the bug, I don't know, I think there to, she was a bit of time without a job, so she was running quite a bit in Bois de Boulogne, and you know, then it inspired me to go out running, and I started to run again, you know, 10 kilometers, but it was a bit of a hectic job, so I was doing quite a lot of time at work, and you know, finding time to do other stuff was a little bit hard, or my own personal stuff. And we lived on the 6th floor of the apartment block, no elevator, and I'd have to carry like I think 12 litres of water, because the tap water wasn't great, up to the top. So that was my other sort of task. But yeah, I started running again, and I think like at some point when I was in France, I got the knee pain again, and I just backed off again. I was like, okay, well, you know, that's what it is. Long story short, moved to Australia. The job was even more hectic, even more demanding. I don't know, worst job, but the best job, because it taught me the most valuable lesson in life as well, that, you know, you live your life for yourself and not for the work and the job that you do. Did a few runs over there, really loved it, really enjoyed running on the trails, like along the bays and stuff. It was just beautiful. Ended up coming back to Helsinki, and we randomly both decided to run the Helsinki Marathon. I think it's because in Sydney, Emma decided to run a half marathon there, and she did like amazing, and I can't remember her time, but she did amazing, and she was like elated, and it, you know, inspired me again to go and try. And so we tried to do, we did the Helsinki Marathon with pretty limited training, and I had my knee taped up and all those sort of things. And I hit the wall, I think physically actually this time, at 30 kilometers, and ended up, I had the stubbornness to finish, so I walked it out for like an hour or 2 hours. I walked all the way to the finish line, even though I was like throwing up and such. So that was a nice experience in that sort of sense. And my knee was in pain after, or not normal, not in pain, and I just thought, again, I'm not meant to be a runner. So I continued road cycling again, as I do. I mean, I still love road cycling. It's a great sport. But yeah, and then I think I decided to, just looking at my notes, making sure I'm not missing anything off. Yeah, but then I started running again, I think when I was like 32, and or early 32s, and no, the battery's gonna die. Alright, so it wasn't the battery, it was the memory card that got full. I forgot to delete all the other stuff. So yeah, I was 32, and I decided, like, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this, you know, on-off, stop-start, my knee. And I think still then I wanted someone to go like keyhole surgery and fix it. So I managed to get a physio appointment, and I think it's because like the Finnish person on the phone didn't understand, and they just directly gave me a physio appointment, which was great for me. And I went to the physio, and she did some tests, made me stand up against the wall, lying down, doing different things, and it was really, really good. Like, we were speaking half English and half Finnish, and she said to me, okay, look, the problem is it's your glute. Your glute is your bum. It's not activated when you're running. And she showed me a few things, and basically if I stood up on my right leg, it would sort of cave out to the right, and when you're sort of landing, you know, imagine you should be landing like straight like this, but my leg is landing like that. You've got like incredible torsion on your foot and through your knee, and that's where all the pain goes. I was just like mind blown. Oh my god, this is the first person who's ever taken me seriously, who wanted to help me. It's not, you know, just treating a problem like a flu or whatever, but they wanted to help me progress and live the life I wanted. And just a simple piece of information that the problem wasn't actually my knee. I always thought my knee was the problem. The problem was the fact that I wasn't running with correct form, and my glute was not activated, and as a result the whole chain goes down my foot. And I was just like mind blown. And then she gave me exercises to do, and I like went into those exercises. I did them every day. I think it was 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes every evening. I did all the reps. I did them, you know, I don't think I was meant to do them that often, but I wanted it badly. And I started to do it for like a month, and then after that I started to run again. And yeah, my knee felt good, it felt strong, I didn't feel anything bad. I think then I went to the running track not so far from where I live, and I wanted to test myself, and I just went and I did an 18-minute 5k. And I was like, damn, you know, that was good. You know, it felt good, it felt hard. and I achieved like quite a good time, I believe. I was just hoping sub 20, and to get 18-minute 5K, I was like, yeah, man, I'm pretty good at this running stuff again all of a sudden. And yeah, so that's where I think it like really kicked off in recent years, because I'm 34 now, and that was like early 32, I guess. And yeah, I started getting more passionate and into running because I could run. And I started running a lot more, doing like 40 kilometers a week, like 3-4 runs. And I had no issues, no problems. So I was just like, wow, what's going on here? We did a half marathon, and I did like 1 hour 40, I think. And I mean, like, it's not the most astronomical of times, but I mean, depends, you know, on your ability where you are. So it can be an astronomical time, don't get me wrong. And I was so happy to like finish there, and I finished strong in that race. I finished the last 3 kilometers, you know, with a high split, and that made me realize, hey, you've got more in you than what you're putting out. And then I just started running more and more and more and more, and here I am today, in a way, 34, and I've you know, been doing like 80 kilometer running weeks. And I'm not saying there's never any issues or things, but you know, there's constant battle to sort of be the best version you can of yourself, and also the best athlete you can be. So I've had, you know, little pains, and sometimes little things come back, but that's a normal thing. And the only thing is, you have to be prehab over it, and like try and address the issue, and not just, you know, rest, ice, compression, elevate. Yeah, they're great, you know, they are super awesome things, but you really need to figure out what the cause is of the issue. And that's what happened with me. And then, you know, these last month, I've done Cooper test, which is 12 minutes as far as you can run. I did 3,510 meters, and that was like another kick for me to go up. And then not just the other weekend, I did a 17 minute and 5 seconds 5K, and I wasn't going full out as well, I'll just say. I'm running with a few other things, but I was like super pumped for this. And look, I'm not just pumped for it now, I have been for the last year and a half, because I've been doing other things. Like last year I did 3 ultra races, and all of them were 70 kilometers in distance. So I did 3 70-kilometer ultra races, and some other smaller half marathons, and I've really enjoyed trail running so much more, I believe, at the moment, because well, visually, and also the challenge of running uphill. I've always enjoyed going uphill on my bike and uphill on my with my feet. So yeah, that's where it's led to me. I'm not going into too much details on those, but I placed quite well in some of those events, and yeah, I'm really happy with where I am now. That's my running story, that's where I come. Let me know a little bit of your running story. You've got a YouTube channel, share your running story. That'd be super awesome to hear and share around. And you know, I enjoy hearing how other people have got to where they are, and what their story is. And if I can help in any way, you know, from what you've heard from me, then contact me, drop a message below, contact me through direct messages in Instagram. I'm not putting up there because it's not there, but yeah, like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this. Really appreciate it. Have a good night. It's evening here, or morning if you're watching it in the morning, or afternoon if you're watching it in the afternoon. Cheers everyone.